Hello and welcome back to the Silmarillion Film Project. I'm your co-host Dave Kale, and we have a very fun episode today. We're talking frame narrative, everyone's favorite moment in each season that we do, where we get to be very innovative and come up with brand new stories involving Lord of the Rings characters. And this time we have some excellent teenage melodrama involving a young Estelle that we know our listeners are just going to absolutely love. Don't you think, Professor Corey Olson, one of our other two co-hosts?
That's
excellent
right.
Teenage melodrama. Huh?
Excellent teenage melodrama. That's right.
And what do you think, other co-host Trish Lambert?
Well, it certainly is Adventures of Young Aragorn in a way.
That's true. People have been clamoring for it. Now you get it.
Exactly.
Right.
And we'll have time for more later on. I mean, one of the things we were discussing last week was, how we have to be careful to kind of walk a line, right? On the one hand, we want to include fun stuff from the Lord of the Rings era in the frame narrative, but at the same time, we don't want to spoil anything that we might want to do in a full season, when we get there down the road. So we have to be a little bit selective. Yeah. So that's why we decided last week on the Fell Winter as a sort of dramatic episode in that era. We had to shift the dates of it, of course. It happens a good deal earlier, and so we had to push it back later so that it would coincide with this and come right after the Hobbit framework, chronological framework, rather than during Bilbo's childhood, which is really when it was. But anyway, so because we figured that's the Fell Winter was sufficiently dramatic that it would make an interesting sort of plot point within the frame, but it would not. It's not like it's something that we would spend a huge amount of time on necessarily in the later seasons. So. But yes, it's an intriguing balance, because if we have nothing happen and they just sit around and talking all the time, we get into that, the problem that we had last year with the Arwen frame, too much just conversation and nothing but conversation. And then this year we were at risk of having action in the frame, which would actually overshadow the action of the main episodes at certain points. So. Yeah, it's tricky.
We can't win.
Exactly. All right, so today we didn't quite finish up the frame last. So we talked about the frame last time, didn't quite finish it up, and we want to come back and revisit that a little bit and sort of tidy up some things and some issues based especially on some contributions that you guys have made on the discussion boards. And thanks everybody for their contributions there. It's been a lot of fun. So, and then we're going to go on to a few creative challenges. We don't have anything quite as overarching again as we've had before. First two seasons, of course, were huge in trying to figure out some of the basics of how are we going to represent the elves and the Valar and stuff on screen. We've had huge issues in the earlier seasons. Having already established some of the framework for these things, we have fewer things to like that to think about this year. But there were a few issues that I wanted to talk about. I mentioned last time, you may remember, specifically Metagraf. Why do the elves move underground in the first place? Second, the Helcaraxa. What happens in the Helcaraxa, and is there a way that we can make elves walking along and slowly getting hypothermia and frostbite interesting to watch? And then third, what's going on in Angmar? How do we want to, or not Angmar, Angband? How do we handle the story, the bad guy's story? I wanted to talk about that a little bit more, as we've talked about that some in the context of the outline of the episodes, but it's something almost like the frame narrative, where I would like to kind of map out in advance a little bit more exactly how that storyline is going to go, so that we can be thinking about how we want to weave that in to the main episode line, especially since, as we also mentioned last time, really the bad guy plot is kind of the glue that holds the two halves of the story together. We've got the Beleriand half of the story, and we've got the Noldor half of the story, and the only thing they have in common through season 2 is Melkor. So the bad guys really do sort of serve as a way to combine those two. So I think that's clearly something we need to give a little bit more thought to. Last season we thought about the bad guy plot, but we didn't really think about sort of the plot arc, and we didn't plan in advance. It was, well, anyway, in our discussions here in our sessions, the discussion of the bad guys always got kind of pushed aside, so I want to make sure that we think that through first. So that is the plan. And today we have the only announcement I have at the beginning is I just want to remind people to be looking at the fall courses at Signum. The Signum courses are going to be beginning in a few weeks at the end of the month of August. And we have a couple brand new courses this term that I think people will be interested in. One is our new Intro to Germanic Philology 1. We have a 2-semester Intro to Philology sequence. So if you've ever been if you've studied, especially if you've studied some older languages, and you're interested in what exactly is this philology thing that Tolkien did, it's an opportunity to really dig into it and get a chance to see and understand philology firsthand. The other is our Norse myth and saga class. And that's going to be really fun. That's, of course, that's all in translation. You don't need, no Old Norse is required for that class, though it's taught by the same professor who did teach our Introduction to Old Norse class. So you'll get a chance to study the Norse sagas with somebody who's really immersed in the Old Norse stuff. So anyway, so that's going to be, so those are really great. And there's other fun courses too, my Chaucer class, and we're offering John Garth's Tolkien's Wars in Middle-earth class, the course which looked in depth at Tolkien's World War I experience. Should be really great. So, yep, that is the announcement, to make sure that you look into our fall Signum courses.
Germanic philology, that's pretty awesome.
It is pretty awesome, yeah. We have a full 2-semester sequence planned now, so that for people who want to study philology at Signum, you can get the 2-semester Germanic philology sequence, and then you can do our Old Norse cycle and our Anglo-Saxon cycle, so that you can be focusing on and developing those languages in particular. We may be adding some other one of our professors really wants to teach a class on Gothic and Old High German and that kind of thing. So that would be really fun, really hardcore, but really fun. So yeah.
That's like the Signum. That should be a informal Signum motto.
Right.
Really hardcore, but really fun.
Hardcore but fun. Yes, exactly. Hardcore but fun. That's it. Good. All right. So let's get back to SilmFilm stuff. So the frame narrative. So from what we did last time, I have. So let me advance my slide here. So instead of putting up the full 12-step synopsis, and Marielle was doing a lot of work on that. Thanks, Marielle, for that. It was a little too much to just put up as a visual on screen. You can see that on our discussion boards. I can give a sort of a summary of it, and it's following Estelle, of course. Aragorn, he leaves. So we have him leaving Rivendell in episode 1, and you guys, Trish and Dave, would be interested to hear your comments on this, because I'm more familiar with this than you, because Trish had to leave early and Dave wasn't here last time. So you guys can, interested to hear feedback from you guys. So he leaves. We have a rebellion thing. That parallel was really easy to do, right? That's in the same episode that Feanor is rebelling and leaving Valinor. So the idea that like the 16-year-old boy feels like he is hemmed in a narrow place in Rivendell and being kept in a gilded cage, that parallel kind of wrote itself. Episode 2, he's discovered missing, and Eladon and Elro here are sent off after him by Elrond. We have, Estelle in the wilderness, possibly the suggestion was that he's doing fairly well in the wilderness. I kind of am attracted to the idea of him not doing that well in the wilderness and needing to be rescued. But you know, I it's fine. I don't have to make everybody a wimp at the beginning. Episode 3, the twins find him and he refuses to return, and they agree so long as they can stay with him, which he kind of resents. The whole thing has the winter background because, again, it's the fell winter that's coming on. We have the episode 4 with the first snowfall, and that's when they encounter the Dunedain. That's when they meet the rest of the Dunedain for the first time, and Aragorn is a little shocked because, you know, they live very rough. You know, he like goes into this sort of rugged gypsy community basically, and it's not at all what he expected.
He was expecting the northern kingdom of the descendants.
Yeah, something that looked a little more like the descendants of the kings of the north, basically. Yes, and then didn't look like vagabonds. Exactly. Yeah. I mean, because
I like it.
He's used to a pretty high standard of living, Estelle is. So, I mean, we don't have to actually make him, you know, all squeamish and over the top, but he
well, it doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to be primarily sort of a him being, you know, kind of fussy about it. It can also be, you know, shock and kind of concern over the state of his people, right? So it's not just him being like, ooh, this is uncomfortable. It's more like, you know, what's become of my house? What's become of my people?
Well, he doesn't, I mean, he knows there is people, but of course he doesn't know. Well, see, so what he doesn't know that he is the heir. So the fact that he is the heir is going to be known to Halberid, but not to Estelle himself, and therefore probably not to Halberid's son either. I would think the younger generation wouldn't. This would be a fairly big secret that possibly only Halberid knows about, and maybe a couple other of the, you know, like of the old companions of Aragorn's dad, basically. But So anyway, okay, so
But again, I don't think we have to portray him as being squeamish or fussy. It can be more. It can be more. It can be more concerned about the people, you know, and less sort of like, I don't want to live like this. Sort of, he doesn't want anyone to have to live like that.
But shouldn't he be at least a little soft? I mean, he's never left Rivendell before.
Yeah. No, he can be soft, but he doesn't have to be. He can be soft, but he doesn't have to be, you know, too. I think he needs to have a little bit, but like you said, it doesn't have to be over the top. We can portray it as somewhat sympathetic as well.
I mean, he hasn't been. Like, I assume he's been out with at least the twins, right? Elrond, like hunting, perhaps around.
Maybe.
Rivendell. I mean,
probably. I mean, it kind of depends. That I would say that decision is really, that's a Gilrain decision, right? That is, we have to decide that about Gilrain. You know, because Gilrain could very plausibly say like, no, I don't want him endangered in any way. So like, she could have denied her permission for him to leave the valley. And I mean, he still has the run of the valley, and he still presumably will have been doing. I mean, it's not like he's going to be a wimp. You know, he'll still be doing physical exercises, you know, and even combat training. But so, you know, he won't be hopeless. But as far as like surviving in the wild, I'm not sure if he's ever done that kind of thing before.
So are you thinking, because to me it's like Elrond knows this guy is like the king. Part of me thinks that he would have included that kind of thing. I mean, he certainly will have been taught, like, you know, archery and, you know, combat stuff. But so it's possible that Elrond would think, in fact, I mean, I'm kind of agreeing with you, like, well, I don't need to worry about the survival in the wild thing because the Dunedain are going to take care of that part of his training.
Right.
I mean,
right.
he could, you know what I mean? Or, you know, if you do have a conversation between Gilrain and Elrond at any point, you know, they could even, if we have them in this frame narrative, that could be like, well, you know, you didn't want him to do it, but he's got to do it now, so let the Dunedain train him or something like that, you know.
Okay.
So yeah, that makes sense, to where he wouldn't have done any of that stuff, at Rivendell.
Right. But okay, no, I see. So the general, those of you who are attending live, the general sentiment is that we shouldn't have Gilrain become that obsessive, like he must never leave the valley kind of, you know, to not have her be simply overprotective. Nick is reminding me that we had Gilrain arguing when he was 10, you know, that he needs to be prepared for his life, and that makes sense to me. But of course, the reason that I'm asking this is that we have to make this fit with both of their characters, right? Because if Gilrain is not overprotective, then Aragorn's objections in episode 1 are going to look even more pettish, right? If he were actually restricted, if he could never leave the valley, then he'd have a legitimate complaint, right? And then when he says, like, I'm hemmed in a narrow place, and does his parallel to Feanor thing, it's more sympathetic, right? He should go out into the wide world. If he is going out into the wide world with supervision and he's just like, I want more and I want to go out by myself, it makes him sound a little more pettish and less sympathetic there. So,
Right.
Which is fine. I'm totally fine with that. We just need to decide where we want that to rest, if you see what I mean.
I could see this having, I mean, I don't think we can backfill on this, but I could see this having been like a bone of contention between Gilrain and Elrond, you know, from the early days, which is, yeah, he needs to be trained, but I don't want him to go too far. So, I mean, I could totally see Elrond kind of like rolling his eyes and going, oh my God, you know, I just, like, this woman drives me crazy. Okay, how about if we have the twins, like, train him, but just around the troll shots, you know, just,
right.
I mean, just in the wood, like, he can get him back home if he needs to, you know, from the woods. Knowing that, you know, at some point he's going to have to go with the Dunedain, you know, like, he's going to, like, table the rest of the training for the Dunedain. So he like placates Gilrain, doesn't necessarily completely do away with the training of, you know, preparation of Estelle.
Right.
But so it's a compromise.
Right.
You know, and then he knows the Dunedain are going to be able to take care of the rest of it. I mean, something like that. You know, where everybody keeps in their particular characters.
Yeah, that makes sense. And as several people have said, you know, he could be more familiar with the theory than the practice of many of these things, so that he's not, you know, he isn't like a city boy in the wild, but he's still unpracticed and unproven. Another question: having
him be trained and having him be fully prepared is two different things.
Right.
I think it's perfectly plausible that they that in his upbringing at Rivendell they've trained him and taught him things, but they haven't turned him loose in the wild with all the wolves around him just yet.
Right.
Well, you know, that could give Aragorn a little bit of a swagger, right? Like, he thinks he knows. Oh yeah, I know this wood stuff, no problem.
Right.
And then he finds out he knows nothing.
Right. Well, and of course he also happens to be doing this during the Fell Winter, which is like the harshest conditions that the, you know, Eriador has faced in like a couple centuries. So sort of bad timing as well, as far as that's concerned. Okay. Now Marielle is suggesting one thing that could have happened. This is Marielle again with a good suggestion. Remember that the necromancer has just been kicked out of Mirkwood. In other words, Sauron has just returned to Barad-dûr a couple years ago, right? I mean, that's recent. Like, that happens. The frame narrative in season 1 was right around the time of The Hobbit, so it's only been a few years since that has. So Sauron has returned to Barad-dûr and proclaimed himself, and so Marielle is suggesting perhaps that news would have reached Rivendell, certainly, that Sauron had openly proclaimed himself in Mordor again, and maybe that spooks Gilrain a little bit, and she is wanting to curtail his activities. since she now suspects, you know, she believes that Sauron is likely to be hunting for him or something. It would give some excuse for an increase of paranoia and why she might sound a little bit different now than she did when he was 10. But anyway,
that makes total sense. That's our solution.
Yeah.
To being able to simultaneously demonstrate that he has had training and he has been prepared to an extent, but have some kind of external force trying to reel him in, which would lead to him being frustrated. I like it.
Yes, he wants more.
All of that's perfectly plausible. Sauron probably would be looking for him.
Right, quite likely. And so as he's growing, he wants more and more freedom and to go further and further, while as time goes on and the reports from Mordor go in, his mom is wanting to pull him back more and more and be more and more cautious.
Especially, we could in the prior season, or somehow we could maybe insert some evidence that Sauron has heard rumors or hints of Isildur there in the north during during his time in Dol Guldur and his time up in the north. We could add some hints that Sauron's caught wind that Isildur's heir might be up there somewhere. Yes. And so maybe there's like an increase in orc activity and that kind of stuff.
Hey, I heard a hobbit.
Wally agrees.
Wally agrees. That's right. Good. Yeah, no, I agree. And Karita's right. Karita's is quibbling with my use of the word paranoia. She's not wrong. It's not paranoid, actually. Right. No, I agree. And this actually fits in with the Fellwinter stuff. We'll come back to that in a minute. But it actually fits very well. The fact that they have evidence that Sauron might be looking, or have good reason to think that may be true, is definitely something that we could think about. Okay, all right. So back to the suggested outline. So he comes to the camp of the Dunedain, and the central feature of the camp of the Dunedain that we talked about last time, we have sort of these two primary characters among the Dunedain. One who is Halbarad, and we chose Halbarad because we needed a chieftain, well, like a steward chieftain, to rule. Because remember, everybody, including almost all the Dunedain, have to believe that the heir has died. Like, this is the first generation without an heir of Isildur around. They all think the line of Isildur is dead. Most of them do anyway, but some of them have to be in the know. So Halbarad is chieftain. And so he can't just be steward chieftain. He has to be called chieftain if he's going to keep up the idea that the line is really extinct, right? So he's the chieftain of the Dunedain. But he knows who Estel is, so he's got to be one of the few people who knows who Estel is. But he's of course going to be a good steward. His son is going to be annoyed, is going to be the rival of Estel. Okay, so we had that beginning.
There's a couple of things that are really interesting about that. First of all, it's going to be really interesting down the way when Aragorn actually finds out about himself, and how is that going to affect his relationship with Halbarad? Because up until this time, Halbarad was the chieftain. Now all of a sudden he discovers he's the chieftain. You know, how's that going to be? The other thing is, Halbarad's son and Estelle, for as long as we have them, I don't know, this could be a little cheesy, could sort of almost be a Boromir-Faramir mirror in a weak way, not in a super strong way.
Well, we're not going to have him for long, because the idea is that Halbarad's son dies in a couple episodes. So,
well, Boromir, there you go, right?
Boromir, exactly.
There you go.
Right. Except instead of wondering why his father is not king, he's going to be like assuming that his father is king, and okay. So good. Let's see. All right. So the next step of the plot. So they start off with rivalry. Like, they don't like each other from the beginning. Halbarad's son. Let's stop and pause at this first question point from the frame narrative. Let's choose a name for him. What do we name him? We had a few suggestions: Halbaron, Herendil, Arondur, which means king's servant, Halgar. Tony Mead has just delightfully suggested Hamilcar, in honor of Ham Bulger, who doesn't make the final cuts. That, of course, was Fatty Bulger's name before it got changed to Fredegar. It was Hamilcar, which is another one of those joke names. Tolkien loved these, right? He loved these historical joke names for hobbits.
Yeah. How about Bledorthin?
Bledorthin. No, we should save that. We totally need a Bledorthin.
Okay.
We totally need a Bledorthin, and we need somebody to make fun of his name. That's got to happen.
Should be a Dunedain, probably, right?
Yeah, somebody. I don't know. But anyway, the joke, of course, with Hamilcar is that Hamilcar was the name of Hannibal's father. Like, you know, Hannibal, the Carthaginian general, his father's name was Hamilcar. So it's like this historical name, but one of those, like, really, so like the name of the Carthaginian leader who, like, swore undying enmity against Rome. Tolkien names a hobbit after him, and chiefly because he can call him Hammy for short, and like make fat jokes at his expense. So, like, he takes the name of the Carthaginian general and turns it into a hobbit fat joke, right? That's like, it's like classic hobbit nomenclature right there. But anyway, yeah. So,
well, that sounds like the perfect name for a noble Dunedain youth.
Exactly, Hammy. Yeah, we'll call him Hammy for short. Anyway, so what do you guys think? Names? Hakan likes Horrendo.
What? Yeah, I think I like that too.
Not a big fan.
I don't like to be Halba. I don't like the Halba start.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Also, Halberon just makes me think of moron. It rhymes with moron. So
yeah, Tolkien was fond of the Oron ending, but yes, for that reason, I'm slightly less fond of that as well. Not to mention that, of course, boron is an element. So yeah. Boron is on the periodic table.
In seriousness, though, Hamilcar, I think, is actually pretty good too.
Yeah. I kind of like Hamilcar. I'm kind of warming to this idea. Yeah, I can almost hear Marie and Nick and Marielle rolling their eyes at us as I say that. But yes, I
Why would they do that?
I don't know. I just, I like it. Let's call him Hamilcar, and they can outvote us if they want to. Okay, now Nick points out we should have something that means something in Elvish. What, like you don't want the name to be in Punic? Do you have something against Punic names? Is that... Okay, fine, right, I understand. Zach Coleman points out that Estelle can insult him by calling him Hammy. It gives, or Ham.
Oh yeah.
There's sort of there is a potential there. Yeah. Okay, well, I'm going to call him Hamilcar for now because I think it's fun. So, okay. So he and Hamilcar are rivals from the very beginning, and they get into fights, and so they actually get into an inconclusive scuffle. Then he is... okay, so then we have... I'm up to episode 5 of the synopsis. So... hints that the winter is unnatural. This is not just a severe winter, but there's something worse going on. The invasion of the wolves begins, so the increase of the wolves is a big deal. Suggestion that Estelle dislikes camp life and puts his foot in it by asking why the Dunedain don't have a proper home, because he's being ignorant of that, we get taunting back and forth from Estelle and Hamilcar, and Halberid trying to be a peacemaker. We want to stop at the Prancing Pony, because the Prancing Pony, of course, has been run by the family of Butterbur for Time Out of Mind, so that should be able to stretch back, therefore, at least this far. Time Out of Mind, of course, could be 100 years, but we all assume the Prancing Pony is still there. And we were saying, age-wise, it's too long ago for Barlaam Butterbur to be alive yet. He can't even be conceived yet. And his dad.
Yes, we get to do a Butterbur ancestor.
Yeah, Barnabas, which is pretty simple. Yeah,
it's been in the family for years. Right?
Exactly. So, but even his dad is probably going to be a kid at that point.
You get to do like his grandfather.
His grandfather's got to be running it. Yeah, his father should be Barnabas. That's very easy. I say that because again, that was Barlaam Butterbur's original name in. And Titus can be his grandfather's name.
I have an ancestor named Marmaduke. How about Marmaduke?
No, we got to save Marmaduke. We've got to save Marmaduke. Oh yeah,
okay.
Marmaduke. Also, yeah.
For the Barlaymans, can we do something similar to the dwarves, where the son is born to be just like the father?
Right. Right. Sure. Sure. Okay. Let's see. So what's happening at the Prancing Pony? Oh, this Mario was suggesting that the Prancing Pony, Estelle gets in. Hamilcar derisively introduces Estelle as Strider as a joke. I'm not sure I like that because he's not earned that name yet. I mean, Strider is in reference to his going about on those long shanks of his, right? So, like, whereas Longshanks, of course, is the even more derisive name for him that Bill Ferny gives. I don't think he can have earned Strider yet. He's got to be around Bree a lot more. Besides, I wouldn't think that would be the name that Margaret Joyce and Tony are suggesting. How about Trotter? That is even better. I love it. I love that idea. Yeah, because that sounds more like a name that would be put upon him by a rival who thinks he's soft. Yeah. Marie thinks
I don't think Strider.
Maybe he may have a funny way of running or something too. That would
a funny way of running. He wears wooden shoes. The problem is his wooden shoes.
Maybe he runs like an elf.
Yeah. I don't think we should actually have him wear wooden shoes, by the way. But anyway, it's Trotter. No. So Marie thinks that Bree is rather superfluous to the frame. I agree. I think it's fun to sort of check in there and have an old Bree and Barnabas and Timothy. Or Titus, either one. Timothy Titus was the very first original name of the barkeeper at the Prancing Pony, and then it was changed to Barnabas Butterbur, and from there to Barlaam. So, but anyway, well, I'll come back, Maria. I've got some more comments on Bree there, but anyway, okay. So this ends with an active taunt. So the idea is that Hamilcar taunts Estelle and basically dares him to go off, and the suggestion was to go off into the old forest, which has been invaded by wolves, and that he basically does this to prove himself. And Halberud discovers and is horrified, and Hamilcar goes after him to try to undo his the damage that he's done. They meet up there. They are attacked by wolves. Hamilcar is mortally wounded, though Estelle gets him out, and then he watches over his dying companion. The idea is they meet Gandalf as well, so that Gandalf, this is the point at which Marielle was suggesting that Gandalf could come in and meet them when they return back to the camp with the desperately wounded Hamilcar, who's too far gone for either Gandalf or the twins to heal. And now the suggestion from there goes that the Dunedain learn that the wolves have invaded the Shire, and Halberud goes to fight and to help to save the Shire with Gandalf. Mariel's suggestion was that Estelle stays with, he longs for martial glory but volunteers to stay with Hamilcar instead, so that he stays by his now friend's side who dies, and they make peace as he dies, and then he returns home. I'm not sure. Okay, well, there are a couple things, a couple comments I have here. One is there's not enough, there's only a small amount of rashness, and my problem is too few people die. I need more destruction to occur. I'm exaggerating, but the point is that we had talked about parallels with Feanor. In thinking about the big picture of the frame and the themes of the season, one of the things that I want to do, to me, one of the subtexts of the entire frame is Aragorn could be Feanor. In both cases, we have two parallel characters. The character who is the natural leader of their people, who is sort of gifted with natural advantages, right? Strength, intelligence, beauty, all these things. Aragorn is great. He is the greatest of his folk. There's no one like him. I mean, think of all the praise that's heaped upon him in The Lord of the Rings. Aragorn is a natural born hero, and the heir and the destined future king and all this stuff. What's he going to do with it? How's he going to act? How is he going to choose? And I would like to see him faced with some of the same decisions and making even some of the same mistakes, or like, it's not that he needs to go down the same road as Feanor, because he's not going to, but we need to see him choosing to avoid that road, the Feanor road. So I want to, and I feel that, I like this outline in general, but the thing that I like about it least is that at the end of the outline in particular, after the fight with the wolves especially, it seems to me to kind of lose the parallel with Feanor, and I would like to recover that, especially, of course, as we have Feanor's story coming to its conclusion, right? I want to show... Well, it's tough, because Feanor is at the end of his story and Aragorn is only at the beginning of his, so we can't very well make them directly parallel. But...
unless you were planning on killing Estelle, which I assume not.
No. Yes, that parallel would be taking it a bit too far, I think.
So where did you say again that you think it breaks down around the point where they meet where he and Hamilcar encounter the wolves? Is that where you think it breaks down?
I like that, but I also I kind of regret having the protection of the Shire happen off stage, basically.
Oh.
So Marie, that's where I was coming back to, saying about Bree. I like going to Bree. I agree with you, Marie, that to some extent the trip to Bree feels a little bit superfluous now, but not if he's actually involved in the action. I mean, if they come to Bree because they are, that we know that the wolves cross the frozen Brandywine into the Shire. So the wolves are coming from that direction. So having them begin at Bree to set out to head off the wolves, and join the hobbits in their fights, at Buckland and in the East Farthing against the wolves, it's something I want to show. I mean, we have all that action. I would want to show it. And what's more, if we involve Estelle in that action, we give him the opportunity to make decisions and to make choices which we can make parallel or anti-parallel to Feanor. Whereas if he's doing less, then we don't have that as many options. Yeah. Yeah. Now, Nick is pointing out that part of the problem is that the flow of the story gets a bit weird towards the end of the season. Both the Beleriand and Feanor subplots kind of come to an end before the season is properly over. That's right. That's true. I mean, Feanor dies earlier on. The Siege of Beleriand sets in. Sauron's victory is as complete as it's going to get down there, and not in the final episode or anything. Yeah. Exactly, Marielle. I am thinking in Bree they learn that the Shire is threatened, or so they know that the wolves are invading south. It's there that they see that they observe that the wolves are heading east or west. Sorry, the wolves are heading west, and they're going to cross the they see they're going to cross the river into the Shire, and that's when Gandalf can come to them and say, the Shire folk need help, and yeah. Yeah, interesting. Nick says there has to be a cue that Aragorn is closer to Fingolfin than Feanor if we want to jump parallels, I think. Well, it's not that we want to jump parallels necessarily. I mean, in a sense, of course, Feanor and Fingolfin as well are kind of parallels, sort of foils for each other. I mean, both of them are the two brothers. Feanor is different. I mean, he's sort of head and shoulders above Fingolfin, but, in like natural ability and everything else. But still, like, both of them are confronted, they choose different paths, right? Hakan asks, are the twins back in Rivendell by this point? No, I think the twins stay with him the whole time. I don't know how they would possibly explain. I mean, I guess they could say we left him with his people, but even then I would think that Gilrain would flay them. So no, I think they should stay with Aragorn.
I kind of like the idea of the three of them, Estelle and then the sons of Elrond, going on a little bit of an odyssey. Mm-hmm. Kind of just starting with running around the woods, visiting the Dunedain's camp, going to Bree, maybe being involved in the maybe the climax is the defense of. I don't know how well this parallels with our main season 3 story, but maybe climax is the defense of the Shire, and Estelle doesn't get to go home and recover, doesn't go back to the last homely house until the very end of the season.
Right. Yeah,
I mean, kind of like a odyssey.
Exactly, and it clearly gets out of hand from Elladan and Elrohir's point of view, right? They agree to stay with him. Okay, you can travel around a little bit. From there, it's a logical step to say, oh, okay, fine, let's go visit the Dunedain because we're here, right? Aragorn's, Estelle says he wants to see his people, and they're like, well, okay, they're not too far away, I guess we can do that. And then once they're with the people, they're like, we were headed south to investigate, these rumors. Oh, okay, well, we'll just go along with you there. And then the wolves attack, and then so in the obviously Elladan and Elrohir don't really plan to like take him into battle to help to save the Shire, but it kind of spirals out of control and gets to there, and that seems fairly simple.
But also, based on what we know of Elladan and Elrohir, it wouldn't be a stretch if they didn't exactly go out of their way to keep him out of the fray, right?
Right.
Don't they kind of seem like the type that they'd be like, well, I mean, we're here in the middle of the battle anyway.
Yes.
They weren't ever exactly the most cautious guys,
especially if we make.
They seem like the Elrond and Elrohir seem like in kind of the Rivendell setting where you have sort of wise Master Elrond is the one guiding him, and Gilrain is sort of his kind of maybe somewhat protective mother. Elladan and Elrohir seem like they would be the cool crazy uncles.
Right. Well, and especially Elladan, who is the one that we had. He's the one with the bloodthirstiness problem, right?
Yes.
And the penchant for vengeance. So.
So maybe we have a dialogue throughout the season between Elladan and Elrohir, where Elrohir is occasionally saying, I really probably should head back home.
Right.
And Elladan, and every time Elladan convinces him.
Yeah.
And it's not like and and it's not like Elro here is like being dragged along reluctantly. He gets convinced each time. He's like, oh,
Right.
okay, yeah, let's keep going.
Right.
But every once in a while, his conscience pricks him, and he thinks
Right.
like, oh, should we really be doing this?
Right.
And then Eladon convinces him again.
Right. Yeah.
The other thing I'd love to see is Halbrand talking to the twins, going, "Well, what am I supposed to do with him?" Or having,
Right.
Conversations about him, because of course the twins know and Halbrand knows. So it's like they talk from time to time about, how to bring this kid up and how's he going to be the king and stuff like that.
Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, no, I like that. And certainly that does seem like a good divide, where Eladon is from the beginning all about egging him on, basically. And Elro here is the one who is saying, no, we should do the proper thing. We know that that your mom would not approve, and we said we would bring you back home. Yeah, that works. Okay. So they end up in Bree. Somebody remind me, Nick or Marie, remind me, which episode did we have Feanor dying in? I know this was a point of controversy when we did the outline at the beginning, but can you remind me when Feanor's meant to die? We do have to make sure we think carefully about the frame for that particular episode. Okay, so, but thinking about the climax, you remember that at the very end we have the sun rising and Fingolfin arriving, right? That's what's going to be happening in the final episode. Episode 10 is when Feanor dies. And didn't we have, wasn't I suggesting that Denethor, like the massacre of the Green Elves, happens in episode 11? Wasn't that my suggestion there? So that we ended that? Yeah, that was my suggestion. Okay, so
That's correct.
The projected outline was Feanor dies in episode 10. The Green Elves are surrounded and killed, and Denethor is killed in episode 11, and then episode 12, Fingolfin arrives and the sun rises. So episode 12 can definitely be a return to Rivendell, right? Or episode 13. I'm forgetting how many we have. Episode 13. So wait, what happens in episode 12? Right, episode 13. Right. And there was a lot of pushback on Denethor's death in episode 11. Yeah, that's what I was remembering. And my counter to that pushback, as I recall, see, look how good I am at remembering what happened 2 weeks ago and even 4 weeks ago. My pushback to that reaction was that that's basically the end. That's the culmination of the Beleriand plot, basically. So that's why I was wanting to have that, because episode 11 is sort of late enough to end that.
So what are we saying? Where's the defense of the Shire occurring?
That's the question. That's what I'm trying to sort out. What we want to make the battle parallel with.
Right, because we have Death of Feanor is episode 10, right?
Yes.
And so that's kind of a big battle, and then we have episode 12 is also another battle. That's the slaughter of the Green Elves. So if the idea
that's 11. That's 11.
Oh, that got moved. I'm looking at the PowerPoints from last time.
Oh, do we move it? Okay.
I don't know.
Okay.
I'm looking at a PowerPoint where it says 11 is making up Sun and Moon, still crossing Helcaraxi trolls. 12 is arrival from Helcaraxi.
What does that even mean? I don't even know what that means. Okay.
What?
Nothing. I'm just trying to figure out what that means. Okay.
What
trolls.
Does trolls mean?
Trolls. Yeah.
Well, I mean the important point there.
The making of trolls. Right. Got it. Yeah. Yeah.
The important point there is that trolls has an exclamation point.
Right. Naturally. As it would. That's just what you would expect. Okay.
So do we want it on it? Do we want to have like a major battle episode where there's battles in the frame and battles not in the frame, or do we want?
Well, and we do have
want to like.
Yeah. We have to be careful about that because we don't have much time. Now, Nick was pointing out that since we are so limited with time in the frame, we could stretch the battle out over several episodes. Because it's not like we're going to have time to show the ebb and flow of a battle with the wolves.
Oh, that's true. And is that going to be a battle, or is it going to be more like a siege?
I think it could be, yeah. Sorry.
What if we have like the latter half of the season is him living down on the border of the Shire, under kind of siege conditions, and seeing what, like, you know, it's one thing to be living in the camp with the Dunedain. It's another thing to be like down on the front.
Right. Yeah. Yes. I mean, I agree that we don't have to have a huge climactic battle. But these are wolves, so it's not like we're going to have a prolonged siege, right? I mean, wolves don't do siege. We're not going to have, like, wolves manning catapults or anything. I mean, like, you either fight them or you don't.
The wolves that set up a blockade.
Right, exactly.
But what would, like just asking the question, what would that be like? Like, would it be kind of a one-time, like a big pack of wolves shows up and attacks, and once driven off, they're done? Or is it going to be more like there's a period of time where it is not safe to go out at night anywhere near the outskirts of the Shire, or it's not safe to, it's definitely not safe to walk into the woods on your own. It's not safe to be traveling on the roads. That's when I say siege, I don't mean sort of necessarily organized siege, but sort of a period of time where the Shire is you know, the lands surrounding the Shire are incredibly dangerous.
Right. Well, that's got to happen. I mean, again, you know, wolves are not going to advance as an army. You know, they're not going to attack all in one place or try to take a town or something like that. They're just going to be invading in packs. So
that's why I'm wondering, like, it could be that he's down there for a prolonged period of time where what they're trying to do is clean out the woods.
So a particular...
Interesting. Yeah. How soon after, like, does this happen, like, really close after Bilbo arrives back?
He's been back for what, like 5 years, something like that?
Okay. I was going to say, if this happened too quickly, Bilbo wouldn't even make it back to the Shire.
Right. Bilbo's return journey slightly more eventful in our version. But he would be there, right?
Yeah, that's kind of cool. So we're going to be interacting with Bilbo?
I think we have to, which is another reason why I can't possibly stomach the idea of having this all happen off stage, basically, because if the Fell Winter had happened post Bilbo's adventure, you've got to think, right? He's gonna put on his armor and pull down and take down his sword and go, right? I mean,
and he'll use his ring to ambush wolves.
Yeah, he's got his ring, his mithril coat, and sting, right? So, you know, surely he would.
Unless like just happenstance on in the first party heading out in the woods to kill some wolves, a branch falls, hits him in the head, knocks him out,
knocks him unconscious. Yeah, exactly. It could happen. Yeah.
The best authors do that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So I tell me if you're on the same wavelength as I. Like where I see us heading is that because we don't want this to happen off stage.
Yeah.
We want to make sure that we get to present it, and because of the limited amount of time we have for the frame each episode and stuff, I'm kind of thinking maybe we spend half the season down in the Shire, doing skirmishes with the wolves and kind of dealing with life in life in the wilderness and on the front. And like this is where Estelle really gets his education on, kind of what it's like out there in the real world.
Agreed. Which means I would suggest that the conflict with Hamilcar needs to be integrated into the struggle with the wolves and not separate from it. Like in the outline, the original outline here, They have their little thing, and he goes off and does his "I am brave enough to go into the woods by myself" thing, basically before the real battle breaks out in the Shire. And I think we need to connect those two things. I think we can have him goaded to a moment of rashness that which we can make parallel to Feanor's rashness that gets him killed. And so, you know, maybe actually that would be a good way to do the Feanor Aragorn parallel thing. Aragorn is goaded by the taunts, or the earlier taunts of Hamilcar, into a moment of rashness in charging out, which would have led to his death, like Feanor's led to his death. The reason that Feanor dies and Aragorn does not, is that Aragorn is rescued by Hamilcar, who dies, right? And then so Hamilcar comes out and saves him, and then is joined, you know, the others can come in, Elladan and Elrohir can be involved there, and Halbarad and whatever. So he can be saved. He's almost killed. He would have been killed had he not been rescued. And so his realization of this and the death of Hamilcar is one of the things which we can show being this sort of formative moment.
Yeah. And I think so maybe what happens here is they get down to the, like, Elladan and Elrohir and Halbrand consent to take him down to the front, but he's not going out on raiding parties, or at least he's not in the same way Hamilcar is. Maybe Hamilcar, despite being young, is going out on, like, with teams of other young Dunedain who are prepared. And Estelle, the only time he gets to go out and encounter wolves is when he has adult supervision, and Hamilcar harasses him about this. Right.
Yeah.
You know, and kind of, I don't know to what extent Hamilcar is kind of privy to Aragorn's.
He's not, is he?
He's not. I think he's not.
But maybe he has. Is there some in the outline at least? There's some suggestion that Halbarad at one point pulls him aside and tells him, you know, gives him a little talk and says, "Hey, this guy has like a special destiny or something."
Or could just be that he senses it, you know, that he just realizes this kid is getting some kind of special treatment. He doesn't understand why, which just makes him angrier.
Yes, exactly. He would be sensitive to the fact that his dad favors him.
Right.
Yeah. Is he privy to the notion that this guy is intended to be a leader of some kind? Like, they must know that, right? Do they know that he's the son of the chieftain?
Halbarad does, but who? Hamilcar? No, you're talking about Aragorn, right?
Well, I'm wondering. I mean, how would the Dunedain not know that he's the son of the chieftain?
Because they think the son of the chieftain was killed. That's what was put about. Gilrain and...
Don't they know... Oh, okay. Then they
Gilrain
don't know he's Gilrain's son?
And Aragorn have vanished.
Okay.
Right.
And I would think that the excuse, like the explanation for why Gilrain stays in Rivendell, like basically that they have put out that the two of them are dead. And Halbarad has to be instrumental in that deception story, basically. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, what I was getting at, if there was an awareness that this guy is supposed to be the leader, then that would be a plausible point of conflict where Hamilcar is saying, like, you're supposed to be the leader, you're supposed to be the chieftain, and you can't even be trusted to lead a raiding party out into the woods to fight wolves. Some leader you are.
Right.
But if we're keeping his identity a secret, then we can't do that.
No, we can't do that.
But he could sense that he's getting some kind of special treatment and really resent it.
Yes.
So
he would.
There could be some taunt related to that.
And yeah, and so I mean, it would just be chiefly about it would just be chiefly about Aragorn trying to prove himself, basically. So it would have to be.
Hamilcar assumes he's the heir to the chieftain, right? He's the heir to the chieftaindom.
That he himself is. Yes.
That he himself is.
Yeah, he would be.
Right.
He would. If we don't tell him, he would have to be. I mean, if that's a secret, then he would. So that would be. It's a little tough
That
on
would add a
Halberud.
little
Yeah.
attitude.
Yeah. Oh boy. Like, imagine the day you've got to pull your son aside and be like, "So, by the way, I was just faking the whole time. We're not actually chieftain." You know.
And guess who is chieftain? You know.
Yeah.
The guy you like.
That
so
guy.
much.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. No, that's an unenviable conversation to have as a father. But
Is that? Do you think that conversation happens before Hamilcar heads out into the woods? At some point, Halbrand realizes he has to take his son into confidence, pulls him aside, and says, "Look, you need to know about this guy." And then
Which
that's
could explain why Hamilcar sacrifices himself to save Aragorn.
and then that's when Hamilcar's like, "Oh crap!"
Yeah, that's Nick was suggesting that when Estelle goes out. He overhears, or like basically like his dad and Eladon and Elrohir completely freak out, and he doesn't understand why his dad is completely freaked out, or maybe he overhears them, or somebody says something or maybe his dad at that point, like Halberud in his just kind of breaks down and says yeah.
So in other words, I think this is good. He dies knowing that Aragorn is actually the chieftain.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's
yes.
right.
Yes. 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 I do think that's good.
We're gonna have to encourage someone to have like a web TV version of the frame narrative, just devoted to the frame narrative. You know how they do that? They have like spin-off little web television programs.
Right. Right.
Yeah, so we'll have an animated web series that fills in the gaps.
Right. 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 Now, Tony Mead has an interesting suggestion that although Halberud is the leader, he never actually calls himself chieftain, and Hamilcar doesn't understand why he doesn't take the title.
Yes. Denethor Boromir.
With the Denethor Boromir thing, yeah. I think that is possible. I mean, because basically it would... And Mariel was just asking, do we need to explain why they're deceiving their own people? We could mention it. I mean, Gilrain could even come up in episode 1, that everybody thinks they're dead, because they didn't want it to get back to the servants of the enemy, that they want the servants of the enemy to believe that the heir of Isildur that the line is completely extinct. And that's got, it can't be an open secret, right, that he still exists. So they decide that for, only a small handful of people, like Arathorn's closest friends and supporters and kinsmen, know about the Gilrain Estelle to Rivendell plan. Everybody else thinks that they were all killed. But it would make a kind of sense, right? Given how tradition-oriented the Dunedain have to be, the chieftain has been the heir of the king, right? After the kingdom fell,
right.
The chieftain is the heir of the. So the idea that Halberud, as the first non-heir of Isildur, leader of the Dunedain, would not take the same title, does make sense. I mean, and
right.
That's something that could fly without giving away the secret, right? Everybody could still believe that the line was extinct, and yet have him not do that. And Hamilcar could be, being like, well, why aren't we chieftains? You're the next heir. Yeah. Yeah, good, exactly. Mario was thinking maybe they call him captain instead. Tony was just suggesting that same thing. Yeah.
I was thinking more like vizier.
Vizier. Viscount, maybe. Marquis. Yeah, Marquis. Absolutely. Yes. Karita says it's going to be really sad for people when Boromir dies and we get to see Aragorn relive the moment when he was watching Hamilcar die. Yeah, yes. Absolutely. See, I love this kind of thing. If we don't get to play the long game in the SilmFilm project, what's the point, right? I mean, exactly. Sowing the seeds for that. Of
course, that does bring up the thing about Hamilcar. It should be an architect then, right? Hamilcar should be full of arrows.
Yeah, well...
While he tries to save Aragorn.
That brings up an interesting question. Do we want anything other than wolves? Do we want to up the stakes there at all? Well, that brings us to the other question. Causes of the fell winter here. Why is the fell winter happening, and why is it happening now? Especially given what we were talking about.
You're talking about like supernatural type stuff, right?
Right.
I mean, like,
right. Exactly.
Not natural. Yeah.
Yeah. And this kind of, so we brought this up last week, but we didn't really settle it. Because there are several things here. First of all, the timing is too coincidental, right? Especially since now in episode 1, we're bringing up the fact that Sauron has proclaimed himself. So like this new era of, danger and evil is come to Middle Earth. And then this huge fell winter happens, right? So that seems like that shouldn't just be an accident. And then you remember that, the belief among the Losoth that the Witch King of Angmar could control the weather, right? So
I was just going to say Witch King. Yeah,
exactly.
Witch King
So is this like, is the Witch King back, or is Angmar reviving? This is something that it was a suggestion that the Dunedain would interpret the fell winter as like, oh no, perhaps this means that Angmar is rising again, with Sauron's return.
Well, and they could actually be worried that Sauron might actually enter Angmar. They don't necessarily know that he's gone to Barad-dûr, right? To Mordor. Could Sauron be in Angmar, or I suppose, like you're saying, could the Witch King be setting himself up again in Angmar, given that Sauron is back in Mordor?
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. So I like the idea of there being a massive eruption of Mount Doom when Sauron returns, and that causes to actually have like a meteorological explanation is a little different, but it could that could definitely work. But my question is it? That is it a return from Angmar? Is it a return of? Do we have something from somebody up in Angmar? Is it just wolves? Or do we have other things besides? Wolves invade the Shire, right? Do we have something other than wolves that don't get? Well, exactly. Yeah. So maybe like wolves and orcs come down, and the orcs are defeated, but the wolves get through. Because what are you going to do, right? I mean, you can't exactly set up an anti-wolf blockade very well. So the wolves get through and invade the Shire, but the orcs are stopped. Something like that. Trolls suggests.
There we go. That explains it.
Yeah. Marie says we found something that works historically, meteorologically, mythologically, and cosmologically. The volcanic winter is. I agree. I'm totally cool with the volcanic winter. I like it, but yeah, no, it's good. It's perfect. It works in lots and lots of ways. But again, is it only wolves? Because we could not. I mean, we could bring in some orcs. We could totally do that. Or trolls. Also, trolls coming down from the north would not be unheard of, right? So I think it would be interesting to sort of show, and of course, one of the things that we would be establishing is how the Dunedain are protecting the Shire, right? So of course, in the Shire annals, the fell winter in which the wolves invaded is like one of the great disasters of recent memory, right? But it would be kind of fun to sort of show people, because this is exactly what gets implied at several points in the Lord of the Rings, that this thing which is held as a great disaster and one of the worst events in recent Shire history was actually way, way better than it could have been. Like, had the Dunedain not interceded, that that invasion of wolves would have been nothing, would have been like nothing. Anyway, just asking the question. It seems an important one to decide. There seems to be a general movement for sticking to wolves. Nick says they could be led by a werewolf. Right. I mean, we do have like those unnatural wolves.
Or wargs. Wargs could be involved.
Right. Exactly. I mean, that we've got the remember the wolves down in Eriador, or down in Eregion. I mean.
Eregion.
Yeah. So we could have some wargs and a particular warg chieftain that gets brought down. So still the ones that get into the Shire are sort of lesser. Now Zachary Coleman points out that between The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings, trolls become a bigger deal, right? We get that thing about how the trolls are now armed with dreadful weapons and stuff, right? So seeing a sort of shift from trolls no longer William and Bert anymore.
One question. This is kind of a meta comment. And Wally's agreeing with my point here. We're kind of there's some implications for kind of the timeline following The Hobbit of the changes we're making, right? In the sense that the Hobbit and some of the apocryphal materials around the Lord of the Rings. I guess the Lord of the Rings references this too. That like following the fall of the dragon, that we get like these years of peace and good things happening in the north,
Right.
And we're kind of undoing a lot of that, right? The implication is that transition to like the trolls becoming no longer dull-witted but
Right.
cunning and evil
Right.
and that kind
Right.
of stuff. That happens over the course of like 50 years.
Yes.
And we're saying basically they kill the dragon and they get 5 years of peace and then it all goes to hell.
Well, I'm thinking Bilbo wrote that ending as wishful thinking. Like he wrote that ending of Happily Ever After before any of this stuff happened.
Right. Right.
He was like projecting how he'd like it to have
Well, that
ended.
is true. He usually starts with writing the ending, doesn't he?
Yeah, I could see him sort of saying, yes, and this is, and before any of this stuff happens, and this is how it's going to be from now on. And it's like, then when it happens, he's like, I'm not going to go back and finish the ending. I'm not going to go back and change the ending.
But see, what we could show, though, Dave, is what happens around that ending. Like, in the from the point of view of the Shire, yeah. I mean, there's the Fell Winter, and this is only 5 years after Bilbo's returned. But after that, I mean, we still have like 65 years of peace and prosperity, right? But the point is, outside the Shire...
That's until we get to that period of time in our frame narrative in season 7 to start stirring up more conflict and danger.
No problem. No, but see, I'm incorporating that because this is the beginning. Remember, it's at the time of the Fell Winter when Gandalf takes an interest in the Shire folk, right? As a whole. So... I know that shifts the chronology and how would he be friends with the old Took and get connected with Bilbo and stuff beforehand and whatever. I'll handle that problem later on when we get to The Hobbit. But the point is, if this is the moment when it is perhaps not normal for like the Dunedain have probably not been deliberately protecting the Shire before this point, but after this point they do. Right. So from now on, the Shire is going to be more sheltered than it was before. And so it will be this golden age of peace and prosperity in the Shire, and they will be sheltered and protected. But they don't understand why. But so outside the borders of the Shire, things can get as feisty as we like them to get. Exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
Plus, Aragorn's going to go south and, serve for Gondor and all that good stuff anyway. So, when he turns into Thorongil, he'll be busy other places.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. Exactly. Yeah. We'll be able to take him out and spread the chaos to other regions. So that'll be fine. Okay. So I think, by the way, that Bilbo should come in. I don't know where Bilbo should come in. Should Bilbo be involved in the battle where Hamilcar dies and Estelle has to be saved from his rashness? What role does Bilbo play? See, having it just be wolves really limits Bilbo's usefulness because his invisibility is not so very useful against wolves.
And Sting can't light up either.
Exactly. Exactly.
To be perfectly honest with you, I'm not convinced that Bilbo's role in this is like Bilbo's going to be out with the hunting parties, like fighting against the wolves himself. I kind of thinking Bilbo's Bilbo's involved, but maybe not as a foot soldier. Like,
right.
He would
Bilbo's
want to
involved.
be saving the Shire, so his whole attention probably would be on making sure the Shire, or at least Hobbiton, is okay.
Because I guess, you know, apart from a few moments where he's, you know, especially with the spiders, where he's like, you know, getting his hands dirty and killing them and stuff. Although even that was pretty limited, right? Mostly what he did was infuriate them and draw them away. He missed the entire Battle of Five Armies, and he expressed serious distaste for it, right? He said that was like definitely the worst part of his journey. I don't see him necessarily being. It is true that the wolves limit us, and so maybe it's worth considering adding some goblins in there or something. But I don't know if we're just doing it to give Bilbo something to do. I don't think that's necessary. I don't really see Bilbo being maybe Bilbo goes out with some of the hunting parties and stuff, but I don't see him being in the thick of the action. I kind of see him. He's back. Maybe he can be Estelle's companion on the sidelines, where they say like, you know, all right, we're going out. You can come with us, Estelle. Bilbo, you're coming too, but you two stay back there. You're not getting involved.
And the other,
kind of like Merry and Eowyn.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and the other really tricky thing is we have to be careful. If Bilbo is like captain and hero on the Shire side, that would have a permanent shift in his reputation, especially in the East Farthing, right? I mean, like, Farmer Maggot would remember the heroics of Bilbo Baggins in helping to save the Shire in the time of the Fell Winter. As like Farmer Maggot's probably alive already. At this point.
Why I would suggest that that it's less organized than that, in the sense that maybe the Shire, because recall that in the Lord of the Rings, the impression we get is that the Shire folk are generally unaware of all the things that the Dunedain have done to protect them. So maybe that's what's happening here, that they're not camped out in the Shire, of course, you know, meeting up with the Shire battalions and all that kind of stuff. They're kind of out in the woods, sort of secretly defending the Shire, trying to like at least thin the packs a little bit, so that the wolves that get through, the hobbits can deal with themselves. And maybe what Bilbo's doing is Bilbo is shadowing the Dunedain. Like, he's out hanging out with the Dunedain, but he's not directly involved, but he's also not involved directly necessarily with the defense of the Shire, so that the Shire folk are also unaware of the role he's playing.
Yes. Yeah. No, I think that has to be the case. I think the Shire people have to be unaware of the role that he plays. So it has to be, as Nick says, his contributions have to be largely invisible, right? Which seems perfectly right. The other thing with the Shire, what we would want to do with the Shire is, again, it's not a military operation on either end, right? Because the hobbits aren't an army and the wolves are not an army, right? So this has to be, but I think there should be like a rising of the countryside. The Dunedain and Gandalf need to be impressed by the hobbits, right? And so what we can do is a kind of parallel to the Scouring, right? Where they unexpectedly rise up. Gandalf and the Dunedain can expect that the hobbits are just going to be dead meat in front of the wolves, right? That the wolves are just going to go through and slaughter everybody. That's like their narrative, right? And what they're thinking is going to happen. They'll be surprised by the fact that the hobbits resist. And yes, Robert, we do need to make sure we get the horn call of Buckland sounded. Absolutely. So the horn call of Buckland sounds, and they come out. So they fight the wolves and they band together against. But again, we're not talking pitched battles, right? We're not talking about forming of militia. Even it would be the forming of hunting parties, right, to go out and hunt down the wolves. So it'd be more like the countryside rising and responding in this way, which again fits in with the series of skirmishes. No one single major battle. And Bilbo can be mostly scouting. He's the only one of the hobbits who knows that the Dunedain are there and is helping to coordinate that, to communicate with them and to relay to them what's going on in the Shire. which is why his contributions are pretty much unseen and unnoticed by the Shire folk themselves. Yeah. And so Hakan, I think Hamilcar has to be killed by a wolf. There, if it's only wolves, he can be killed by like the great big werewolf warg chieftain dude, right? Well, you know, we can have a boss wolf who ends up killing Hamilcar as Hamilcar steps in and defends Estelle from him. But okay, I think this works. I like this. Mario had an interesting suggestion about bringing in as a cameo among the Dunedain Gilrain's parents who could still be alive and who don't know who think that Estelle is dead, or maybe they don't. But I don't know if we'll have time for that. But yeah. We do have a vote for there being trolls and that Hamilcar should be killed by a troll the way that Feanor is killed by the Balrogs. But I think we can do the parallel with the boss wolf if we need to do that. Okay. However, the frame isn't all we were going to talk about today.
I think adding trolls makes this is starting to turn this into more of a organized invasion. Yeah. Unless remember that one winter when the wolves got a little out of control. Right. That's we're starting to Peter Jackson it now.
Right. Rather over-egging the pudding. Yeah, and that's even without bringing in wereworms, which several people suggested. Yes. Okay, so let's go to our other questions because we are getting.
I say Azog should lead the invasion.
Yeah, well, that makes sense. At least as much sense as anything in the Hobbit movies made. Okay, so I think. Oh, so the last point, do we add Tharbad to the frame? That was a suggestion because of having the flooding of Tharbad and the abandonment of Tharbad. I think we have to lose that. I don't think there's time for it. There's too much to be done with fighting orcs in the snow around the Shire. So I think we skip that one. Okay. So, of the three topics we raised last time, Metagraf. My question, the reason, so again, just to explain again the reason I raised this question. If they have the girdle, why do they need extra defenses? Why do they go underground? Why do they live in a cave? And one of the reasons I say this is that I know that this is something that's kind of counterintuitive to a lot of people. A lot of people who read Tolkien are like, why do the elves live in caves? That seems like... Lothlorien makes sense to everybody. You know, the elves living in and among the trees seems like a natural elvish thing to do. Living in a cave seems not like a natural elvish thing to do. So why do they go and why do they move in there and what does it have to do with the dwarves? How do we handle that? My favorite... Oh, see, these are all different sort of suggestions that were made from the discussion boards. There are several things that I like. One point is that elves visit the home of the dwarves, right? I mean, we have some ambassadorial exchanges there, and that they love the beauty of the dwarf cavern, so that it's actually an aesthetic rather than a military choice. And I like that. I like the idea of they would do it differently, of course, in the kind of aesthetics of Metagraf. They're going to be different than the aesthetics of the dwarf halls. But I think that it's a really nifty idea, right? Because if they're living out mostly, in the open in the trees, and they have a place, by the lake, but I like the idea of like the sort of the aesthetic experience, all the carvings and things that they can do underground. I think that's really kind of nifty. The other suggestion, okay, so fire was raining down from the sky at Cuiviénen, right? And we did have the Noldor suggesting underground defenses there. So we would have a precedent for this kind of thing when battle begins. Those who remember Cuiviénen might be kind of spooked by this and say that they would be safer underground. The idea that they're going to hide seems to me, I think we can go there, that impulse to go underground and hide. But, Marie, I think that this was your suggestion, which I think didn't even get put on the slide. No, it is the second one there. The mention of perpetual darkness. Marie was sort of considering this, and this is a wonderful line of thinking, Marie. I really admired this. The chain of thinking, because Marie, as soon as you brought this up, I realized, I think that that's one of the big issues, right? When people imagine elves living underground, it's like, what? When they imagine elves in the forest, I think, generally, they're imagining elves living out in the sun-dappled woods, right? Why would elves live always, enclosed in the darkness underground when they could be out in the sun and the wind and the trees, right? But there is no sun, there is no moon. It's dark all the time outside. So the question is, like, what kind of darkness do you want to live in? And yes, they would be out from under the stars, but they could make lights. Living underground, as Marie points out, actually gives you the opportunity to live in a well-lit and thoroughly lit place, to banish darkness, essentially. Because they can't banish darkness outside, even if they light their homes and they light the city, right? It's always darkness around outside that. And indeed, if anything, that makes the darkness outside look even more mysterious and even darker, right? Whereas if you're enclosed completely in a cave within walls, you can light the whole thing. So they can be living in bright light. They can banish the darkness within their little underground realm. So there is this counterintuitive way in which being underground, in these conditions where there's no sun and no moon, living underground actually allows you to live in less darkness than you would be living in if you were living outside, which I think is really, really neat. So they build this world of illumination underground, and we can have gorgeous lighting, right? Not just, torches and candles, but yes, Nick, crystals, right? We can do lots of things with that kind of, we can have, lots of sparkly light and stuff. There's no reason we can't do that.
When you overturn a lamp in the cave, it doesn't burn your city down.
Right, exactly. More secure in that way too, right? Yeah.
But I sort of get kind of that sort of, when we think of elves informed by 50 years of elves and popular imagination, there is kind of a sense that, like, oh, elves should live in trees, not in caves. Yes. But when you read the Silmarillion, it seems like a lot of the elves live in caves. At least the elves in Middle Earth.
Yeah.
And I don't know whether it's a pragmatic reason where they're saying let's go where it's defensible or what, but another explanation is that several of the cave or fortified areas where the elves live are places where Valar told them to go.
Right. Yeah. And of course, as Tony was reminding us, and as I mentioned last week too, elves living inside mounds and under hills is traditional. Like, it's in a fairy story, that's where you go to fairy, is you go in a hill, you go underground. So yeah, that's very normal. Which is why I think it's actually probably Tolkien's fault that elves are associated with forests, because again, we're thinking of the elves of Mirkwood and the elves of Lothlorien. But anyway, yeah, no, you're absolutely right, Dave. This is going to be a common thing in the Silmarillion. So yeah, it makes. I'd have to do some research into this, but it's an interesting question to me. Before Lothlorien, before the publication of the Fellowship of the Ring, how many elves do you have living in forests? There's the association of, like, the deep forest with fairy. Like, Arthurian folks will often meet elves in the forest, right? But that doesn't mean the elves live in trees, right? Or live in the forest in any kind of way. That's where you encounter them, because that's where the boundary to fairy is. The elves, like, if you happen to be like Sir Lanval, for instance, and you find an amorous elf queen out in a pavilion serving you a nice dinner and taking you to bed afterwards, she doesn't live there. That's not her house. It's a tent, right? She has a kingdom, right? She has a palace somewhere. Anyway. So yeah, I'm wondering to what extent this thing is actually Tolkien's fault, and now kind of circling back around on him when we think about the Silmarillion stuff. But anyway, okay. So we can show some impulse to protection, right? We would rather be, we're worried about the sky. We're worried about fire falling from the sky. We think it might be safer underground. But I think having there be those two positive things, this idea of, their desire to make a realm that is full of both beauty and light, I think would be really cool. So I like that for an emphasis on Metagraf. That really makes me happy, because again, it needn't be a military fortification, but that they choose to do it on largely aesthetic grounds, I think is pretty cool. Okay. My Metagraf. So the Helcaraxa. Is it only the ice that's dangerous? Exactly. That is the question. How do we handle the journey? Now, what are your thoughts about this, Dave? Again, I come back to the phrase that you just used. We don't want to go full Peter Jackson on this, and I think we have a serious danger of this here, right? But at the same time, having the Noldor simply endure the harsh conditions of the wind, of the journey across the Helcaraxa. I don't know. I mean, maybe I'm underestimating it. Maybe we can make that really compelling. Yes, they're going to be.
You don't think like 10 to 15 minute sequences of people walking through a blizzard
and shivering? Yeah, exactly.
So what do you say when you made the Peter Jackson allusion? Are you suggesting that we need to action it up a bit? Maybe have some attacks by some snow trolls or
ice giants suggest
or ice
themselves,
giants or winter wolves?
Yeah,
or...
I mean, because yeah, do we? To what extent? That's my question. To what extent do we want action-oriented dangers? Because so dangers that we have are their provisions running, so starvation, right? Their provisions running because they're not going to be able to get food, right? Their provisions running out, and them being undersupplied for, they're not prepared for the extreme cold. So we've got potential death by exposure and hypothermia. We've got potential death by starvation, neither of which are extremely exciting. And we can certainly do grinding ice, right? We can have falling glaciers. We can have, bits of ice, huge blocks of ice falling out from under people and people drowning. We can have people getting crushed. So there can be those kinds of physical dangers. We definitely should have that. You're right, Hakan. People dying from falling into chasms isn't boring. It's certainly like the scene where Turgon and his wife are separated, and she dies like reaching up towards him, right? And he sees her fall and get get lost in the churning waves. Like, yeah, that can that's fine. Like, I'm not opposing that. But do we? Okay, so here's one other question here. Do we want Morgoth to attack at all? That's one possibility, right? One possibility is that he hears rumor that the elves are crossing the Helcaraxa, and he counterattacks somehow. We could have that occur. I'm not a huge fan of that idea. Neither is Hakan or nor Marie. I understand. Right. Hakan says he'd be focused on Feanor. I agree. That seems likely. I guess to me it depends on how long the Hellcarax. Okay, wait, hang on. I've got another issue. I got another problem. It's challenging to make people dying of hypothermia dramatic. How do we convey the... Even more than that, I'm worried about conveying the strength of the Noldor, right? Like, so there's that line, remember, that talks about the hardihood of the Noldor, new come from Valinor, right? The implication is that humans, a similar group of humans, would all have been wiped out. They would never have made it across the Helcarax. Nobody else could have done that. Even potentially, Sindar from Beleriand might have all died. But because, you know, the fire of their spirits was burning hot within them and their new come from Valinor, they are stronger to endure. How do we show that? Nick says by showing them not freezing to death.
Like those pins.
Right. Yeah, I get that, Nick. But my point is, how do we convey that concept? That is, if we show people being cold but not freezing to death, we're just going to be conveying to our audience that it's not really all that cold, right? I mean, it's like, how do we convey that? Like, no, it is so cold that you would be, that if you were there, you would totally be dead. But these people are super tough and they can handle it.
Yeah. And the only way to convey that, something like that on screen, is to materialize the hardiness, right? So you can't sort of you can't portray on screen that they just happen to be hardy. You have to turn the hardiness into skills. Like, oh, look, they're surviving because they wore big coats and they can make fires.
Right. Well,
I think we have to Peter Jackson this.
Well, because I mean, again, like, so yeah, as you know, as Tim Fisher was just saying, you know, like if there's like an extreme blizzard, but the Noldor are only lightly clothed and not freezing to death, like that's just going to look weird. I mean, like, how do you couldn't that be comic? I mean, mightn't people start laughing if we see the Noldor walking around in a blizzard in short sleeves, saying to each other, "Getting a little chilly, isn't it?" You know, I mean, like that's it totally undermines the drama.
I can just see the Reddit discussion thread now.
Right, exactly. So, right. Hakan says, a human would die after one day. They walk for months or years. I agree. Like, conceptually, I get that. How do we convey that visually in, what, like 3 sequences we're going to get? I mean, we're going to show them in the Helcaraxa maybe 3 times. Limiting the amount of time we spend with them in the Helcaraxa is, to me, the easiest answer to the action question, right? Yeah. Because if we, you know, then we can have one episode of, like, glaciers collapsing on folks, and we can have another one of the ice breaking up underneath them, right? And we can have another we can have another that just sort of focuses on how cold and starving they are, maybe, and that can focus primarily on discussions among the people, right? So we don't have to have, so we can do that. Now, Hakan and I think Nick had suggested this earlier. Animals, right? They have animals with them, and their animals are dying, are freezing to death, which helps with both them running out of food and also conveying how much hardier they are than the average. You
know, Corey, note as a comparison. They kind of like Game of Thrones kind of has the same job to do, right? To try and show that the Northmen are way hardier and much better equipped to deal with the long winter than say the guys from the Reach.
Yeah.
And really the only way this comes out on the show at all, you know, it's a much bigger plot point in the books where it gets discussed in prose.
Right.
In the TV show, the only way you can really communicate it is just to have people keep saying it over and over again, right? Like, It's basically just dialogue.
Right.
Northerners saying, like, you Southerners don't really know what you're talking about, etc.
Right.
I don't know. I mean, I'm not sure it's really critical to like, I think it would be enough to show, like you were saying, glaciers falling on people, people breaking through ice, people freezing, etc. And just showing that, like, a lot fewer people arrive in Beleriand than originally departed. And you know, and letting the viewer kind of arrive at their own conclusions in terms of, like, wow, that must have been a harrowing crossing.
Right.
It was a much bigger group that we saw marching onto the Helcaraxa than we saw marching off of it.
Right. Right. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. No, I agree. And it's, you know, if viewers don't get the fact that the Noldor are way hardier and humans would all have died, it's not the end of the world. I mean, we don't yet have humans, so we don't have that point of comparison even available to us. So, as you say, Dave, there's not even any way to do that in dialogue, right? All we can do is convey that they almost die, and it's really difficult. Yeah, Robert Brown is wondering if we could have malevolent spirits like unto that of Carothros. See, Robert, that's the kind of thing I was thinking of. Like, if I had to add an antagonist, right? If I had to add something to threaten or fight with them other than the terrain and the conditions, I would want a giant of some kind, like an ice giant. Because first of all, I'm not sure whether or not we should put giants into Middle-earth. Giants in Middle-earth is, to me, a really interesting question, actually, because, of course, Tolkien did put giants into Middle-earth, but then he kind of took them out later on. I mean, there are definitely giants in Middle-earth in the early days. You can tell from The Hobbit. You know, he puts them into The Hobbit, too, but he takes them out later, sort of, but never totally officially. Like, he never says there are no giants in Middle-earth. They just get kind of written out, sort of. They're not alluded to in The Lord of the Rings. But anyway, so I personally, I kind of think there are giants in Middle-earth still, and I would kind of like to have some. And this seems like a place where, you know, if you'd park an ice giant, he'd be at the Helcaraxa, right? So, you know, I think but that might be too much. It might be too Peter Jackson-y. Maybe we don't need because then, like, we'd have to have somebody kill him or something, and that'd be melodramatic probably. So,
or they just run.
Yeah, they just run from the giant. Yeah, and he's breaking glaciers off, and that's why they're killing. And
but I don't. I think I'm against the ice giants.
You're anti-ice giants. Okay. Ice giants are, of course, very, very Norse as well. But yeah, it sounds like Wally's against them too. So yeah, I think
I'd be okay with Morgoth sending forces to assault them and assail them.
Right.
But apparently Wally is not satisfied with that idea.
No, I agree. Yeah, no. Wally's clearly making himself heard on this point. Okay, so we have a Wally veto on the ice giants. I get that. Oh, they had a question about should there be the whirlpool Wirrawin, which is named in the Book of Lost Tales. Totally, absolutely. And that's where Elenwe should die, Turgon's wife. Totally, she gets sucked down the whirlpool. That would be good. Okay. Yeah. That's okay. So that's fine. All right. I think we can manage the Helcaraxa. I think, again, the important point is just not spend quite as much time there. On to Angband. Oh, sorry. Yeah. So there was this question about the Aurora Borealis, which of course is theoretically impossible from a meteorological standpoint if there is no sun. However, the idea was that maybe we could have a Valar intervention, that they see the suffering of the Noldor crossing, and the Aurora Borealis appears to help to light their way and assist them as they're in their crossing. That some of the Valar take pity on them. I like the idea. It's certainly, if we are interested in preserving more contact with the Valar than the book establishes, which I kind of do like, we could do that. We could have the Aurora Borealis placed in the northern sky to help to light their way. And the suggestion was to get Tilion involved here, the dude who's going to drive the moon later on in this season, as a way to introduce his character. Yeah, as I recall, right, Hakan is reminding me, the suggestion on the discussion board was that Ulmo initiates it because he feels guilty. You're saying he feels guilty because he made the Helcaraxa, right? And he sees all the elves dying on it, and then Tilion and some of those other spirits help with that. I agree. Varda should be involved, right? First of all, it's a light thing. So Varda should be involved if it's a light thing. Also, we need the whole, like, Varda hearing elves in distress. We can start that, right, already. So yeah, I think I want to hear, I think I want to have her yeah. So Ulmo collaborating with Varda Marie is the kind of the direction that I'm thinking there. Yeah. Varda was Tony's suggestion there. Yeah, I'd be fine with that. So again, if we think about this, right, we've got plenty even without any ice giants or rabid walruses or whatever, because we have, one episode we've got glaciers falling and the whirlpool, right? We've got them being heard by Varda and the thing coming up. Yeah, we're fine. We've got enough, I suppose. Yeah. Hakan says the problem is, how come there are still auroras after this? And the answer is that Tilion's friends are still doing it. Hakan, it can be a memorial, right? We can have Tilion looking down. We can have Fingolfin and them looking up at the northern skies, right, in memory of the crossing of the Helcaraxa. Yeah, that can work. All right, on to Angband, though. We're running low on time for Angband, but that's okay. Okay, so...
Story of our lives.
Exactly. How is Morgoth running the show? How much does Morgoth know? So the question I was asking last time, which I deferred to this time, was, what is Morgoth's relationship with the Sauron-Gothmog rivalry? Is he unaware of it? Does he not care? Does he encourage it? Does he egg them on? Does he set them against each other? What is the political situation? What is the political climate at Angband? I mean, political climate. It's a dictatorship, right? He claims absolute authority for himself, but how does he feel about his underlings squabbling? I gotta think
when the sort of classic Tolkienian sort of bad guy thing to be, on the one hand, anything that inconveniences him, he would be mad about. Anything that could be interpreted as defiance of what he wants bad. Right. But within those bounds, stirring up trouble and encouraging dissent, that's definitely and trying to manipulate people into doing what he wants rather than directly asking them to do it. Right. Seems to be the Morgoth way. That's certainly how he conducted his affairs in across the sea. Right.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, you'd think he'd be pro-struggle, he'd be pro-strife, and definitely manipulative. When you think about it creates an interesting, like, the characters that we've already created for Myron and Gothmog are really interesting, right? And they fit with this really interestingly. Because on the one hand, both of them have pluses and minuses as far as Morgoth himself is concerned, right? On the one hand, Gothmog is obedient. Gothmog is his lackey, right? He's his attack dog, and he would insist on absolute obedience from his followers. So he would like that about Gothmog. However, whereas Sauron has much more of a mind of his own, right? Which ultimately he's not going to like. And so there's a much greater chance that he and Sauron are going to come into conflict, or, I mean, Morgoth and Sauron coming into conflict, because they both have their own plans, right? They both have minds of their own. However, he would like the fact that, but there are other ways in which he likes Myron better, because he would appreciate Myron's intelligence and Myron's initiative, whereas Gothmog is just a thug, right, who can't plan and do things for himself. So, it creates a situation where he has the two captains and he appreciates the virtue, the virtues, right, of his two captains, but he's not 100% comfortable with either one of them, and he's fine with them fighting with each other, as long as you say, Dave, as long as their fighting with each other doesn't undermine what he's trying to do, right? The minute that happens, he would clearly slap them down. Yeah. Haakon reminds us also that we need to deal with Ungoliant, who should be in Nand Ungortheb, and leave her kids with Sauron after eating her mates. Okay, first of all, how are we gonna establish the fact that she ate her mates? We're not showing that on screen, are we? Meanwhile, Ungoliant just finishing up another meal, eating another husband, right, after having another litter. Yeah. Nobody wants that. Haakon says that Myron could interrupt her at dinner. He goes to visit her, and she's... Sorry, I was just eating one of my mates there. I'm all set now. Yeah, I don't think we can do that. I'm not sure we can. That's a line of text I'm not sure we can put in to the story there. Oh, by the way, Dave, side note on Ungoliant. Have you seen the trailer to the new video game? The new
Yes, I have.
Mordor video game? Yeah, and how they totally are ripping off season 1 of SilmFilm, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And giving Shelob a female human form.
Yeah. I think we should consider legal action.
I am thinking, yeah, that's clearly, it's one thing to be derivative. It's another thing not to credit the person whose ideas you're stealing. And obviously, it's kind of lame to do that with Shelob, right? So I've been asked this on Twitter several times. Is there any kind of reason to think that they're not just making that up? No, there's not. Shelob is a spider, I've not been doing some consulting, Nick. You could tell. Let's just say if I were consulting with the Shadows of Mordor franchise, it would not be the way that it is. That, or I would have quit instantly. I can't. I have very little patience for those video game stories. The idea of having Shelob be, I don't think that is not the worst idea that they've had in that video game franchise, but there's of course a lot of competition for that title. I think it can be made to make sense. No, I don't think we should do that with Shelob. We're doing it with Ungoliant because she is basically a Vala. I mean, she is on that level. And so she takes spider form by choice. The things that she mates with are monsters, right? I mean, she's just mating with monstrous spiders. I don't think the guys that she's mating with are other Maya even. So her descendants are just giant spiders. So it's for that reason, I think I would not support the idea of having Shelob have a female form. Having her be able to communicate, like to give dialogue to Shelob, like, do some kind of like telepathic communication from Shelob or something. I would consider having Shelob be able to speak, be able to communicate, so that we could see what she is thinking and we could have like a two-way conversation between Gollum and Shelob, for instance. That I would consider, but I don't see any need to have Shelob take a female form, a human form, that is. Anyway, sorry. wanted to acknowledge that, talking about Ungoliant.
That was great. I enjoyed that.
Thank you. That
was a good rant.
Yeah,
good rant.
I try not to rant about that video game series, but which is why I don't talk about it much. People sometimes ask me on Twitter. They'll be like, "You should do like some episodes on that." I'm like, "No, do you not have any idea how ugly that would be if I did that?" Like,
yeah. It's with the Peter Jackson adaptations. It's entirely possible to kind of dig a little bit and find some core value there.
Yeah.
Those video games, especially the Shadows of Mordor.
The Shadows of Mordor. Yeah. I mean, Lotro is a brilliant adaptation, but the Shadows of Mordor just they deliberately leave the entire ethos of the book completely behind. I mean, it is such a completely alternate universe that I have a hard time even connecting it with Tolkien's world. Yeah. But anyway, okay. Let's back to Myron. So Ungoliant. The idea that it was put forward that Melkor is going to want to find out what Ungoliant is up to, and this certainly seems true, right? He's just had a major issue with Ungoliant, right? Ungoliant fled when the Balrogs showed up, but he's got to be thinking about it, right? Where is she? What is she up to? Is she coming back? Because he never gave her the Silmarils, right? And she wanted to eat them. So is she going to come back after the Silmarils? He's got to be worrying, concerned about that. He's going to want to keep tabs on where Ungoliant is. And given that Myron is the clever dude, he's not going to send his thugs to go after Ungoliant. Even though Gothmog is going to be all, because he and his boys are the ones that took her out, right? Chased her off. So he's going to be all, uppity, right? And good opportunity for taunting Myron because he's already won against Ungoliant once, right? So Myron has to go seek her out. Do we want him to find her? Do we do a Myron Ungoliant episode? I'm not sure we want to find her again.
No, because she does she get a mention at all ever again from this point on? Certainly not in the published Silmarillion, right?
No, we're just told that she goes into the south of the world and there at last in her uttermost famine at last devours herself. So, I do think we should check in with her later on. And Nick, that's exactly when we do it. I totally agree with Nick Palazzo that we should fulfill the fantasy of early Tolkien and meet Ungoliant again during the Voyage of Eärendil.
Yeah,
that we should
perfect.
So he encounters her again, and that's when we meet Ungoliant starving, right? Starving and laying desperate plans to try to ensnare the moon. I
like it. Yeah, that's great. That can happen on the Eärendil spin-off series.
Oh, exactly. We can go as long as we like with the Voyages of Eärendil. But so he goes after her and he'll find her trail, and so basically he'll go to Nandungortheb and find the spiders there, her offspring.
Yeah, I like that idea, and I don't think. Yeah, I mean maybe if we want to send, this does bring an interesting question. So I think this kind of the genesis of this discussion was sort of how does Morgoth relate to the various bad guys? Maybe Sauron's going to get not so much exiled from Angband, but maybe Morgoth's going to say like, hey, I have some missions for you that involve sending him away.
Right.
And this is kind of the beginning of, like we see him later on. Most of what we see of Sauron is him operating not at Angband.
Right. True.
He's at the Minas Tirith at one point. He's at assaulting Baron's father's gang, those kinds of things. This is when that starts. The kind of the never-ending list of errands Sauron's running outside in Beleriand.
Yes, Sauron being his lieutenant out in the field, Gothmog his personal enforcer that he keeps with him, and to lead his shock troops in battle. Yes. Yes.
So maybe when does, by the way, speaking of Shelob, when does she appear? When should she appear in this story? Maybe
I think this is it.
Looking for Ungoliant and find Shelob.
I think so, because he's gonna. We had talked about him allying himself. That is Myron allying himself with the spiders, and I think that this is. When and. Clearly, right? If we're going to have a spider character that he's going to interact with, it's got to be Shelob. I mean, what are we going to invent another spider character? So, you know, having Shelob herself be present and involved in the story is kind of cool, actually, to be able to do that and set her up for later on. So that when we return to, because she is a daughter of Ungoliant, exactly, Marie. I mean, she would have been there. Even Sam remembers that Shelob would have been there, right? When you know, he talks about the webs of horror around Gondolin. So Robert says, how will you distinguish it as Shelob? Well, Robert, this then comes back to the point I was just making. I think she needs to talk. She needs to be able to talk. I mean, I think that basically we can have Shelob not really be one of his inner circle, right? She doesn't join Draugluin and Thuringwethil and Tevildo, right? He doesn't join. She doesn't join them as his, like, you know, companions and primary captains, but she should be. She should be his primary contact. She should be the one who works with him and who is sort of the leader of the spiders. So I mean, and how cool is that, right? You know, that this is Sauron forming an alliance with Shelob way back at this point in the story, so that she's still hanging out in his mountains in Mordor later on, right? I mean, establishing the Shelob Sauron relationship, that's got to be cool. Yeah, but anyway, okay. She's got to be able to talk. Do we have her talk, like, with a voice emerging from her mouth? Or do we ever speak telepathically? Or what do we do? Right in her web. I think we should give her a
pig. I think we should give her a stylized female form, like from a video game. And
yeah. Why didn't I think of that? Yeah. No, we should. Yeah. No. Okay, we have 2 votes for telepathic. Robert Brown's just saying spell out words in her webs. Yeah, Robert, I was thinking of the same thing. Right? Yeah. Yeah. Some werewolf. Yeah. So telepathically, I can get behind telepathically. I don't think we've done telepathic conversation, so it might be a little weird, but hang on a second. The spiders in Mirkwood can talk, right? So she should be able to talk, right? I mean, unless we're going to ditch the spiders talking, but in which case we lose a lot of good dialogue. But if the spiders in Mirkwood can talk, she should be able to talk. I mean, the ability of speech of the spiders of Mirkwood should, apart from their still unusually large but greatly diminished size, be the thing that marks the spiders of Mirkwood as descendants of Ungoliant, right? Yeah, several people want her not to be a very good speaker, right? She's not clever, she's not eloquent. Her speeches should be short and to the point. Yeah, I could see that. I mean, again, she's not one of his counselors, right? She's not one of his captains. She's a free agent, right? I mean, we see that still in the Lord of the Rings, right? We see her being considering herself a free agent operating on her own, and Sauron manipulating her and taking advantage of her presence, right? Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So I think that works. I think that we can have her speak. I'm okay with her not being real articulate or forthcoming. Should we have them be in Nandungortheb, or should we have Sauron set them up in Nandungortheb? I think the latter, because I think the allegiance with his spiders should be part of his plan to invade Doriath. And so he sets them up on the northern border, basically, of Doriath in Nandungortheb. So he could be the one who kind of collects them together, right? There are Ungoliant wouldn't necessarily have settled down in one place. She could have had several spider mates whom she ate afterwards in a number of places, and he can kind of gather them together. Yeah, Drow gluing as sheepdog to spiders. Yeah. Yes, Sauron rounding up giant spiders, right, in a get-along little doggies moment, right? Yeah, and little spider lariat. Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, so Nick, exactly. He wants to try and envelop the whole girdle in a strangling web, right? So establishing them in a permanent residence in the mountains there to the north of Doriath is basically what happens when the girdle goes up, right? He's gonna try to web them around, and then the girdle goes up, and the spiders get driven out from other places, but they remain in those inhospitable mountains, right? Okay, running out of time, but last big question: what about the Orc project? How do we want the Orc project to be? Did we ever make decisions about that? I remember kicking the can on that a whole bunch of times. In fact, as I recall, that was the subject in which the phrase "kick the can" became in common usage in the SilmFilm project.
What decision is it we need to make about it?
I want to make sure, did we decide where orcs come from? Did we show that happening?
I don't know. Did we ever decide? I don't think we decided that.
I think we might have still left that vague. Didn't we still leave that vague? We had elf prisoners, right? And we had Myron interacting with elf prisoners. We had a sort of a laboratory. We did more or less decide, Marie? Somebody remind me what we decided. That was so long ago, I can't possibly be expected to remember things like that. So we did have elves being tortured. So we decided to go with the published Silmarillion route.
And even if we did, we reserve the right to overturn that decision and require rewrites.
We do, absolutely. Okay. I remember suggesting that Morgoth comes in and he takes over the project and pushes the orcs in a totally different direction. It is him who comes in and makes the orcs into basically vessels of hatred, right, and aggression. That wouldn't necessarily have been Myron's plan.
Wasn't Myron's plan was more of a slow, steady persuasion of them to his point of view? Yeah,
he was trying conversion at first. Conversion / like improvement, right? You know, had he had his way, they would have been, you know, he wasn't necessarily just making, right, exactly. Marie says he was trying to brainwash worshippers for Melkor. Right, exactly. So he was making supporters for himself, but he wasn't just going to make them thugs. He wasn't going to make them brutal, aggressive, and full of hatred and rage. Morgoth coming back, right, Marie says they still look like elves. Yes. So he's not even necessarily physically torturing them so much as, again, it's like brainwashing. So he has them in a psychological regimen, right? He has them undergoing this sort of brainwashing thing where they will become worshippers of Melkor and supporters of himself, which of course you could see over time shifting to becoming worshippers of himself, right? We know that Sauron is into the getting worshippers for himself thing. That's a thing that he does in many cultures, right, with the many of the human cultures and stuff. So Morgoth comes back angry. Marie, exactly. He's very ticked off when he returns, and he pours his own aggression and pain, because he is in pain from his hand, into the orcs, and that changes them. So Tony says, what accounts for the physical change? Is it a gradual evolution or a magical deformation? I say the latter. I say he does something. Morgoth does something to them. He alters them. Which, of course, we have precedent for, right, with the Balrogs in Season 1, and their immersion in fire and their emergence as the shadow and flame things that they are. We had talked about Bulldog. I don't know if you remember Bulldog, Dave, from the Lays of Beleriand, and he's this like huge orc captain, this like mega orc captain, who gets some play in the early Silmarillion material, so it gets dropped later on. So we had talked about introducing Bulldog as a character. Yeah. So we talked about introducing Bulldog as a character who is basically he's basically one of Gothmog's allies, right? But he's like a just like a thuggish spirit, but he becomes like the proto orc, the like great goblin figure among the orcs. So he's essentially, we would be treating him essentially as like the archetypal orc, right? Like the king of all the orcs, which means we have to give Bulldog a really important and fitting ending somewhere along the line. Battle of Unnumbered Tears, Fall of Gondolin. We could kill him in the Fall of Gondolin.
So we're deciding how long we want him to last?
No, I'm just trying to decide when he dies, because he's got to die. I mean, he can't, he can't stick around forever. He's not going to survive, obviously.
How long lived are the orcs?
Great question. Nobody knows.
Because if he's the proto-orc and he lasts until the Fall of Gondolin,
But he's different. Like by proto, he's not just the first of the orcs in the sense of like chronologically the first one to be formed. He is a greater spirit. I mean, he is Maya.
Okay. I see.
So
all right, so he can last that long.
Yeah. Ooh. Hakon suggests that Bulldog be killed by Glamdring, right? Hakon, thus setting up the parallel with the killing of the Great Goblin by Gandalf in The Hobbit. Yeah, I like that.
Yeah,
I like that.
Yes.
Yeah, that's good. So, by the way, my answer to the question, are orcs immortal, or are orcs long-lived since they come from elves? My answer is no. No, they're not. I don't have any backing for that. But here's what I'm thinking, though. Miriel puts forth much of her own spirit into her son Feanor in order to make him great, and she therefore thereby damages herself, right? I think that Morgoth establishes the orcs along the same kind of pattern, because he doesn't need immortal foot soldiers, because they're cannon fodder anyway. He doesn't want orc immortality that serves him no purpose. What he wants is orcish fecundity, right? He wants them to multiply. So I think that the spirit, like the resource of spirit that they have, is dispersed in having many, many, many children. Anyway, because the orcs have to multiply like crazy. Anyway, okay. Brianna says, isn't Bolg pretty old in the text? Kinda. I mean, he's not older than Thorin. So, in fact, he's probably younger than Thorin, because Thorin at least was at the Battle of Azanul Bazaar, and Bolg does not seem to have been. So yeah, no, I don't think there's the passage everybody always cites when they want to suggest that orcs are immortal is the conversation between Shagrat and Gorbag, where they're talking about the Great Siege and acting as if they remember the siege of Mordor by the last alliance. Right, the bad old days, exactly. I'm not convinced that that's what Tolkien was going for there. I mean, I think it's just orcs have an oral tradition, right? And they, in their oral tradition, that is to say, I think that conversation is easily explicable by oral tradition, rather than by longevity. But anyway, yeah. I'm not going to worry about it. And as for the goblins recognizing Orcrist and Glamdring on sight, Nick, that's a Hobbit issue. That's a like hashtag fairy tale problems, right? I mean, it's not. That happens at a time when the Hobbit is not at all. It's not even part of the Middle Earth world. Like, so there is no call to think to. I don't think that can even be used as evidence, frankly, because it is part of a conception that predates that story even being connected into Middle Earth. So I mean, I don't really make anything of that. Anyway, sorry. Okay. But I don't think we have to handle this. I mean, I don't think it has to come up. I don't think we need to discuss that in exposition. So Morgoth comes in and he takes over the Orc project, and there's a dramatic moment, right, when they are twisted. Now, what's Bulldog's role there? If Bulldog is a Maya, he's gonna what? Take Bulldog? What does he take Bulldog as a model? Does he first twist Bulldog and then say, yeah, I want more of this? How does that work with Bulldog? Because if he's choosing Bulldog, there has to be a reason, right? Bulldog has to distinguish himself in some way before Morgoth is. I mean, why should Morgoth choose this random Maya and be like, yeah, let's model an entire race of creatures after this dude?
I mean, maybe he was he involved in like maybe he gets put in charge of the initial, like when Morgoth comes in and displaces Myron, sends him out on his field work. Right. Maybe Bulldog was his lieutenant or his assistant on the project, and so he takes over, and then he's the one that ends up deciding to pattern the orcs after himself.
Maybe he's an afterthought. Maybe Morgoth makes the orcs first, and then he's looking for somebody to be permanently attached to them, right? Somebody to be like the chief orc. Maybe even like he sort of wryly offers that to Sauron, and Sauron politely declines. So when he pulls Bulldog, he's pulling somebody who is kind of random, right? Who only emerges to prominence when he's selected to be the head of the orcs, rather than being there first and Morgoth deciding to do things after him or to, so yeah, that works better, I think. First he makes the orcs. He takes over the orc project, and Sauron is the one who's in charge of the orcs, right? It's been his project, Sauron's project. So maybe in a kind of a mocking acknowledgement of that, like, oh, you still wanted to be in charge of these guys, like, okay, I can, you know, I can make that happen. And Myron's like, no, I'm good. And then he takes Bulldog, he can be a random Maya at that point. He's not distinguished himself until he becomes the head of the orcs, and then we can have him do. By the way, what other things are we going to give to Bulldog? Like, what else is he going to do? I mean, the only thing is mentioned in the old, but he doesn't get that much play. He's important. We're told that he's important, but we don't see him doing much, other than he's the one who is going to attack Doriath in order to try to capture Luthien. So he's in the Baron and Luthien story. Yeah. He is brought in to kill Barahir's band, which means he'd be working under Sauron. Ooh, Tony, yes, very good. Tony Mead says he should be the one who kills Denethor. Yeah, good. Yeah, he's the one who slaughters the Green Elves. Like it. Yeah, so we have an accomplishment for him. Yeah, that's right up Bulldog Street, slaughtering the Green Elves. Absolutely. Good. Like it. Yeah.
All right. Now, is this related? Like, is this the thing that qualifies him to be explained? Explained. Is this the thing that qualifies him to be attached to the orcs in some way, or has this already occurred?
It's already occurred. This is his first success and accomplishment as the king of the orcs, basically. Well, he shouldn't be called king, obviously. Morgoth is the king, but you know, he's the leader of the orcs in the field. And of course, if we have him, and I particularly like that, Tony, because if we have him in the south down there fighting the Green Elves, that means he is in Sauron's theater of war, right down in the southern part, in the Beleriand end, which, if we are going to have him be the one who kills Barahir and his band, then you know, we have him working already under Sauron there. Yeah. Okay. I like it. That'll work. Then we have, of course, Bulldog and Bulldog's position in the whole Gothmog Sauron rivalry thing. You know, where both of them will be trying to sort of... He's going to become essentially a pawn in that game. He's going to be another rival, but he is going to be potentially a pawn in that game. So, okay. All right. That'll work. Okay, well, I think that's good. We didn't map it out in detail, but I think we have a lot to work with. A suggestion that I would make to the to our folks on the discussion boards is you might want to be thinking in some of those terms, right? You might want to be thinking about a list of things we definitely want to portray and thinking about where we might connect them in their episodes, so that we can have that mapped out. That would be really helpful. So if you guys want to work on an outline, we don't have to have them in every single episode necessarily, but to make sure that we have the overall plot and some places where we can pin that and where we can fit that into appropriate ways with the rest of the story, which works. Ooh, Nick suggests that Sauron can already have been pulled from the southern campaign, leaving Bulldog in charge, which is why Thingol comes out with a narrow victory in that battle. Yeah, possibly, or at least like that side of things Sauron leaves to him. Yeah, possibly we can have so that it's not Sauron who loses. Sauron is able to scapegoat Bulldog for his less than total success in the south. Right, quite possible. Okay. All right. So let's talk about next time. Next time we are moving on to episode 1. We're going to do our first discussion of an episode. We'll be doing episode 1. Episode 1, of course, is the Rebellion of the Noldor. So we will be doing Feanor and his speech by torchlight Feanor is going to break his banishment and he's going to return to Tirion and he's going to give his speech. And I'm assuming that we're going to end with the oath, right? So the oath of Feanor is going to be included here. Lots of things to talk about. I have 3 particular questions that I want to make sure that we're thinking about. I would love to have people's input before we talk about this. First, how are we going to handle Nerdanel? We had talked about Nerdanel, Feanor's wife, as like they're gonna separate. They're going to become estranged, right? She is going to speak against him, and is going to end up staying in Valinor. So how do we want to handle that? How do we want to make that? Is she going to stand up and make counter speeches? Is she going to be doing something else? How is she going to handle that? What is her role going to be in the scene? What's she going to do when her sons all swear the oath, right? I mean, we got to think about that as well. The relationship to Mom, whom they're basically leaving behind at that point. But then also Galadriel. This is a big decision, right? What's Galadriel going to do? In other words, it is time for us to decide which Galadriel we're going to be talking about, right? I mean, if you've read Unfinished Tales, you know Tolkien rethought this several times. In the published Silmarillion, we still have the version where Galadriel is kind of keen to go along with Feanor, right? She thinks the same way as Feanor. In later versions, he decided that she was going to be like the center of anti-Feanor opposition, to the point where she was going to stay behind and go off to Middle-earth entirely on her own and separately from Feanor. So how do we want to handle Galadriel? What's she going to do, and how is she going to do it? So we have to decide the main trajectory of Galadriel's character at this point. It's a big deal. And then my third question is, who else should participate? We've got a lot of elf characters, right, that we were developing over the course of season 2. Almost everybody's going to be present. Obviously, you know, we don't want to get to, you know, to diffuse the action among too many characters, but who needs to play a role, and how should we handle the other characters? Which ones should play a role? Okay. So those are my questions for next time. Looking forward to discussing that. It's going to be 2 weeks from today. So we'll be moving towards the latter part of August. Here will be what, August 25th is going to be our next session. Any final questions or thoughts from you, Dave? Anything else you want to add that we should have people thinking about prior to episode 1? What is our frame story elements going to be for this? Right, the frame story element was Estelle's initial rebellion against his mom and Elrond in Rivendell. Right, so we have to we'll have him complaining. Yep. Yeah, let's think about how that gets portrayed, and how, you know, what's the spark? Like, I think we agreed that there's going to be news that Sauron has returned and announced himself. Like, how do we portray that? How does that news arrive? Yes. How does Estelle react to it? Yeah. Good. I like it. All right. Thanks very much, everybody. Thanks for joining us, and